जय जय श्री राधे। सब वैष्णवों को जय श्री कृष्ण, सादर सदैन सनंद सनम्र जय श्री कृष्ण. Jai Jai Shri Radhe. Continuing today with Varta number 196 and it's day 203. The story of two thug thieves who killed Viram by hanging her. Bhav Prakash. These are both devotees of Tamasi disposition. In the eternal Leela they are cowherd boys and their names are Vaman and Hari. One day they stole from Shandilya Muni and were therefore condemned to take birth on this earth. They manifest from Shandilya Muni and are thus personifications of his divine loving sentiment. They were born into low-caste families in Gujarat. They were thugs and thieves from their childhood. When they got a little older, they joined forces. Once these two thug thieves from Gujarat dressed up as Vaishnavas and came to Narayan Das's home. Narayan Das was not aware that they were thieves and honoured them as Vaishnavas. Narayan Das was engaged day and night in the recitation of divine discourse, and the two of them partook of Mahaprasad with him. Many days passed like this, but the thieves never got a chance to steal from him. One day they approached Viram, Narayan Das's wife, and asked her to read of the Lord's divine pastimes in a secluded place. She agreed. At that time, Narayan Das was at the king's court. The two thieves and his wife began to read of the Lord's stories in private. Her heart and mind became totally absorbed in the stories, and due to this flood of love, she fainted. One of the thieves tied a noose around her neck and strangled her. They took off all her ornaments and ran away with them. On the way, they met Narayan Das returning from the court. Narayan Das asked them, "Have you partaken of Mahaprasad?" They said that they had not. Narayan Das, "Then why are you leaving without partaking of prasad? This is not right. How can you leave without letting me send you off properly?" Narayan Das brought the two of them home. Their faces shriveled with shame, and they became very afraid that he might have them killed. With these thoughts in their minds, they arrived at Narayan Das's home with him. He could not find his wife anywhere. He asked their maidservant where she might be, and she fearfully replied that she was lying dead inside the house. She has been strangled. Narayan Das entered the house and saw her lying there dead with a noose around her neck. Narayan Das removed the noose from her neck, sprinkled some of the water in which the Lord's feet had been washed, and taking the Lord's name said, "Oh, please get up. These two Vaishnavas are hungry. Let us all partake of Mahaprasad together." Hearing this, Viram stood up. The thugs fell at Narayan Das's feet. Narayan Das said, "Oh goodness, what are you doing? You don't have to touch my feet. You are Vaishnavas, and it would be offensive for me to let you touch my feet. I am already most offensive, and you are accomplished Vaishnavas. You could never be guilty of such a thing. My wife had some karma that she had to bear, and you have helped her to get over that in one fell swoop. Now she is liberated from all faults." Bhav Prakash. This tale teaches a principle of Sarvatma Bhav, where the mind and heart recognize that everything and every act and its result are Sri Krishna alone. Whatever happens is the will of the Lord and dependent on one's accumulated karma that is regulated through his will alone. People are only his instruments and the mediums through which he acts. This tale also shows the depth of one's devotee's love for another. The attitude is that a Vaishnava should never be capable of any heinous act. When one develops this divine consciousness, then one should know that the path of grace has reached fruition within them. This tale teaches the principle of Sarvatma Bhav, where the mind and heart recognize that everything and every act is its result are Sri Krishna alone. Part 1. Narayan Das then sat the two of them down to partake of Mahaprasad. They accepted joyously. Afterwards the thugs begged him to make them into Vaishnavas. They were most insistent. They picked up the noose and threw it outside the house. Narayan Das addressed them, "Go to Gokul, to Sri Gosaiji, and then come back." Narayan Das wrote a letter of introduction to Sri Gosaiji, which he gave to them along with money for the journey. The two of them set off, and after arriving in Gokul, gave the letter to Sri Gosaiji and piped up, "O Maharaj, we have performed a heinous act to Viram, Narayan Das's wife. Please forgive us and take us into your shelter." They were very insistent. Sri Gosaiji graced them by granting them initiation with the Lord's name. The two thugs transformed into accomplished Vaishnavas. Therefore it is said, if you keep company with anyone at all, let it be with an accomplished Vaishnava. The thugs had Narayan Das's association and became good Vaishnavas. After this, the thugs had the holy sight of Sri Navanit Priyaji. They felt very happy. Then they were fed Mahaprasad. They took their leave of Sri Gosaiji and then went to have the holy sight of Srinathji. They stayed there in Srinathadwara for 3 or 4 days before returning to Gokul. They took Sri Gosaiji's permission to go back home. Sri Gosaiji wrote a letter to Narayan Das, and the two Vaishnavas went to deliver it to him. They gave him the letter, and Narayan Das put it on his head to honour it before reading it. He then fed them with Mahaprasad. Bhav Prakash. This story reveals how very elevated it is to keep the company of Vaishnavas. An accomplished Vaishnava can help us to achieve everything we need. Therefore, it is recommended to associate with them. Thus concludes Varta 196, the story of the two thug thieves, who were the recipients of Sri Gosaiji's great grace and became accomplished Vaishnavas. There is no end to their tale. Varta 197, the story of one merchant and one renunciate near whose Mahaprasad a dog walked. These are devotees of Rajasi disposition. In the eternal Leela they are Manakamana, merchant, and her Saki Gosharani, the renunciate. They both manifest from Shandilya Muni and are therefore personifications of his divine loving sentiment. The merchant was born into a family of rich merchants in Gujarat. The renunciate was born to a Brahmin of modest means. The renunciate's parents died when he was 10, and he henceforth begged for grains to survive. He did this until he was 30. When Sri Gosaiji was on his way to Dwarkaji, he set up camp in the Brahmin's village. In that place lived many impersonalists who came to Sri Gosaiji to discuss the meaning of the Shastras. The whole village became Vaishnavas because of Sri Gosaiji's spiritual effulgence, and the renunciate and the merchant at the same time were initiated by Sri Gosaiji with the Lord's name and Brahma Sambandh. Thereafter the two of them asked Sri Gosaiji, "Where do our duties now lie?" Sri Gosaiji granted them both a Sri Thakurji Swarup to serve and advised them to serve him very lovingly. They said, "But, O Maharaj, we do not know how to make Seva." Sri Gosaiji stayed in that place an extra 3 days in order to teach them all the ways of Seva. Then he left for Dwarka, Part 1. Once Sri Gosaiji was travelling from Dwarka to Gokul. The merchant and the renunciate were travelling in his group. The renunciate begged for grains from the other members of the group. He would then bathe and cook before making the offerings to Sri Thakurji. He would partake of the Mahaprasad after settling his Sri Thakurji down to rest. Other Vaishnavas would invite him to partake of Mahaprasad with them, but he never went. One night he had put the Mahaprasad to one side when a dog passed through the boundary of his Seva area. The renunciate asked someone to keep guard over the place and then approached Sri Gosaiji. He supplicated, "O Maharaj, I had put the plate of Mahaprasad down and a dog walked close to it. Now what is your advice?" Sri Gosaiji said, "You should partake of the Mahaprasad. Mahaprasad can never be polluted." The Vaishnava went home and partook of the Mahaprasad. Some days later the merchant had cooked, made his offerings, accepted them back as Mahaprasad and had put the plate down. No one had yet partaken of it when a dog entered the area kept pure for Seva and passed by close to it. The merchant approached Sri Gosaiji and said, "O Maharaj, I had placed the plate of Mahaprasad down. No one had yet partaken. A dog entered and passed by close to the prasad. What do you advise me to do with it? Should I partake of it?" Sri Gosaiji replied, "Do not eat it. The Mahaprasad has been tainted." The merchant went back and gave all the prasad to the cows. He cooked again, offered the preparations to his holy book, accepted back the prasad, and then took his meal. The next day the merchant again asked Sri Gosaiji, "O Maharaj, when a dog passed the prasad belonging to the renunciate Vaishnava, then you told him that he could eat it, that it was not polluted. In my case, however, you said that it had become impure. Please tell me the reason for this." Sri Gosaiji instructed, "The renunciate could not have repeated the offerings, and he would have gone hungry. He also does not accept prasad from anyone else. You, on the other hand, were able to immediately repeat the offerings and then partake of your new prasad. You are a merchant. Your offerings got polluted, whereas those of the renunciate did not." Bhav Prakash. This tale reveals how the rules of purity, aparas, that one must follow stem entirely from one's best ability to do so. One must adhere to the rules as much as is possible, and one must be very honest about it. It is not permitted, when one is fully capable of keeping such rules, to feign inability. This is an offence. Sri Acharyaji taught and established the rules of aparas. Therefore it is the duty of all Vaishnavas to adhere to them to the best of one's ability and enthusiastically. Then Sri Acharyaji will be pleased, and one's righteous duties within the path of grace will be perfected along with one's level of surrender. All other relations will drop away, and Sri Acharyaji blesses such a devotee. These stories also tell us that Mahaprasad cannot be polluted. Part 1 continued. After this, the merchant came with Sri Gosaiji to have the holy sight of Srinathji. He then sponsored several celebrations. He then came back to Gokul with Sri Gosaiji and had the holy sight of Sri Navneet Priyaji and the 7 Swarupas. He sponsored several celebrations for them too. Sri Gosaiji then gave his prasadi leftovers to all the Vaishnavas, who then supplicated, "O Maharaj, please give us permission to proceed on a tour of the Vraja land." Sri Gosaiji gave them his blessings. When they had completed their tour, they returned to Gokul. They paid their respects to Sri Gosaiji, who told them to stay in Gokul for some days. They did so and then took their leave to return home. They got back to Gujarat, where the merchant and the renunciate began to very lovingly serve their Sri Thakurjis. Thus concludes Varta 197, the story of the merchant and the renunciate, who were the recipients of Sri Gosaiji's great grace and accomplished Vaishnavas. There is no end to their tale. Pausing the Varta here until tomorrow. Sab Vaishnavan ko Sadar Sanand Saprem Sadenya. Jai Shri Krishna. Jai Shri Radhe, Aaj ke Anand ki jai, Shri Gosaiji ki jai, Shri Vallabhadisha ki jai ho, Jai Jai Shri Radhe.